081, Munich 1860 Team's Flaw. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The head coaches of both teams walked onto the field, but the home crowd was still relentless with their jeers aimed at Tong Yi. As Tong Yi stepped onto the pitch, the boos grew even louder. If you didn't know any better, you'd think Tong Yi was coaching the visiting team. Xu Pu overheard the insults and a smug grin spread across his face. He savored the moment. He believed the Munich 1860 coaching job should have been his. That shameless Chinese guy had stolen it, and the resentment still burned. Seeing Tong Yi get hammered by the Munich 1860 faithful made him feel fantastic, and he secretly hoped the abuse would escalate. This is your punishment for stealing my thunder. He thought. Normally, the head coaches would meet before the game, shake hands, and exchange pleasantries. However, Xu ignored Tong Yi, turned his back, and hurried to his bench. Tong Yi simply raised his eyebrows, then turned and headed directly for his own bench, also snubbing Xu Pu. Wow! Klinsmann and Fred, in the commentary box, took it all in with a sharp intake of breath. Is there really that much bad blood between these two? They can't even fake being civil. Meanwhile, in the stands, the Munich 1860 fans ramped up their chorus of disapproval, because Stecrus had just emerged from the tunnel. The sight of Stecrus sent the Munich 1860 fans into a frenzy. They pointed at Tong Yi and screamed, demanding he get out and let Stecrus take over. They wanted Tong Yi to give Stecrus the credit he deserved. Some were even shouting that Stecrus was the real leader of Munich 1860. One fan in particular, a middle-aged guy with a beard and a beer belly, was especially vocal. He, Meyer, had once again become a vocal advocate for getting rid of Tong. Hearing this, Klinsmann shook his head. These Munich 1860 fans have been manipulated by the media. Tong Yi's in charge, period. How could they think Stecrus deserves the credit? He couldn't wrap his head around it. Fred chimed in, actually, when you think about it, it's not that far-fetched. Haven't you noticed? Stecrus and Kruger lead nearly all of Munich 1860's training sessions. Tong Yi isn't involved. If he's designing the tactics, why isn't he leading the training? Because he doesn't know how, that's why. Klinsmann shook his head slightly. I don't buy it. Plenty of head coaches in professional soccer don't lead every training session. Tong Yi isn't unique in that. The head coach doesn't have to do everything himself. As long as he formulates the game plan and coordinates the team, he's doing his job. Fred turned to Klinsmann, surprised. He hadn't expected Klinsmann to support Tong Yi so strongly. Fred paused, then said, I still can't believe a 24-year-old coach from China can be this good. He's only been in the business for 3 or 4 years. He came from nowhere in such a short time. It's impossible for him to have that much knowledge. I just don't believe he's the one calling the shots for Munich 1860. Klinsmann shrugged. Ever heard of a thing called genius? Fred chuckled. You think Tong Yi's a genius? Klinsmann shook his head slightly. I don't know if he's a genius, but I'm optimistic about him, and I believe in him. With Klinsmann's unwavering stance, Fred couldn't argue any further. He conceded, time will tell, I guess. Klinsmann nodded. By this time, the players were lining up on the field, ready for kickoff. Munich 1860 was playing a 4-4-2 formation, similar to their previous games. Their starting lineup was, De Gea in goal, the back four, left to right, Alaba, Gavanjanides, Campbell, and Walker, double defensive midfielders, Hammond and Matic, double midfielders, left to right, Griezmann and De Bruyne. Up front, Costa and Lauter. Fred immediately pointed out, there's a change in the Munich 1860 lineup today. Alabas, their usual left back, is out, replaced by the young David Alaba. Alabas is suspended after getting a red card last game. This is a forced change for Munich 1860, and it could be a sign of things to come. This young Austrian player might be their downfall in this game. Klinsmann chuckled. Fred frowned, looked at Klinsmann, and asked, what? Jürgen, you disagree? I do, Klinsmann replied. Fred said, care to share? Let's hear your take. Klinsmann considered for a moment and said, honestly, I know Alaba pretty well. He's not as bad as you think. Fred was astonished. He didn't expect Klinsmann to be so familiar with the young player. With a wry smile, he asked, since you know him so well, tell us a little more about this young talent. Klinsmann was happy to oblige. David came up through the Bayern Munich youth system. I heard about him when I was coaching Bayern. He's very talented and has huge potential. He's a jewel of Bayern's youth academy. To be honest, if he hadn't been too young when I was coaching, I would have brought him up to Bayern's first team. Fred and the TV viewers were shocked. They hadn't realized the kid had that kind of pedigree. Fred was skeptical. Really? A jewel of Bayern's youth academy? Klinsmann didn't hesitate. I'm not the only one who thinks so. Bayern's coaches are all high on this kid, even Beckenbauer is a fan. The German Football Association is working hard to get him to play for our national team in the future. Fred and the fans at home didn't dare underestimate the kid any longer. Who knew that Tong Yi could just pluck a random young player and he'd be this good? Klinsmann added, that's one of the reasons I'm optimistic about David. Tong Yi has a great eye for talent. I believe people with that kind of vision usually know what they're doing. Fred acknowledged Alaba's potential, but he still wasn't convinced that Tong Yi was that great. However, he was still concerned for Karlsruhe. They could all see that Alaba might be a weak spot for Munich 1860, and Karlsruhe's coach, Schoop, undoubtedly saw it too. Schoop would almost certainly target Alaba. And if that was the case, Karlsruhe would be in trouble. In fact, Schoop was already thinking that way, and the tactics he devised were specifically aimed at exploiting Alaba. He knew from his team's scouting reports that Alaba was on loan from Bayern Munich, and he figured the kid was probably pretty good. But that couldn't change the fact that Alaba was young, inexperienced, and unproven. A kid like that had no experience in high-stakes matches. He was easy to exploit, therefore, Karlsruhe's focus of attack was Alaba. At the kickoff, Karlsruhe, playing away from home, took possession. They didn't waste any time testing the waters and launched a fierce attack right away. They weren't a middling Bundesliga team. They'd been relegated from the Bundesliga, and that counted for something. They were confident they had the advantage against teams like Munich 1860. They firmly believed they were superior to these Bundesliga teams. Karlsruhe didn't belong in the second division. They'd be back in the Bundesliga soon. And no Bundesliga team was going to stop them. As a result, Karlsruhe played much more aggressively than the average second division team. They launched a relentless attack from the start, and their offensive thrust was focused directly on Alaba's side. Seeing this, the smile vanished from Fred's face. He started to feel nervous for Karlsruhe. Deep down, he hoped Alaba wasn't as good as Klinsmann had suggested. Karlsruhe was attacking down the wing. Midfielder Timo Staffelt spotted Christian Demetash covering the wing and passed him the ball. The pass put the ball in front of Demetash as he accelerated. Demetash was a Bundesliga-caliber fullback. He'd played for Mainz 05 before, under Klopp. He'd joined Karlsruhe this summer and immediately became the team's starting right back. Staffelt was confident in Demetash and thought he'd have no problem dominating a 17-year-old kid. Demetash felt the same way. He knew he could blow past Alaba, cut inside, and give Munich 1860 a knockout punch. Seeing the ball rolling in front of him, he accelerated. He saw Alaba coming, but he wasn't concerned. He'd easily stretch his leg out to touch the ball and change direction to get past the kid before Alaba could even react. The Karlsruhe fans thought so too. They were excited. Karlsruhe's chance had arrived. On the sidelines, Schoop watched with an easy smile. He felt like everything was under control, and his team was about to get the first shot of the game, threatening Munich 1860's goal. This game was going to be a breeze. He felt no pressure at all. Wow, thought he sighed, thinking, I thought this was going to be a tough battle, but it's turning out to be too easy. Tong Yi. Schoop was confident of victory, with a relaxed expression on his face. At that moment, just as he predicted, Demetash got to the ball first and flicked it diagonally forward. He quickly changed direction, went right past Alaba, and chased after the ball, ready to cut inside and shoot. Fred's eyes widened. Easy breakthrough. Karlsruhe has an opportunity. 082, sure enough, the breakthrough point is Alaba. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Shoop was ecstatic, his eyes glued to Demirtas on the field, but just as Demirtas was about to blow past Alaba, a guy darted out from the sidelines, swiftly knocking the ball away and changing its trajectory. Oops. The Karlsruhe fans groaned in disappointment. What a wasted opportunity. In the commentary booth, Klinsmann sighed in relief. That was a close one. Alaba nearly screwed up. Well, David's youth is showing. He's still finding his footing in the Bundesliga second division. Fred nodded slightly. Yeah, a bit too impulsive. Shoop, watching from the sidelines, felt the missed opportunity sting. He saw Alaba as Munich 1860's weak point. The kid might have talent, but he's too green. This game was a step up, maybe too soon. This match could be brutal for him. Hopefully, it won't shatter his confidence. Shoop said, a hint of pride in his voice. Tong Yi, on the 1860 sideline, didn't get mad. Instead, he walked over to Alaba, gave him a thumbs up, and said, nice hustle. Keep at it. Campbell, getting to his feet, also clapped Alaba on the shoulder, encouraging him. Good stuff. I'm coming at you hard next time, so don't be afraid to get beat. I've got your back, got it? Keep up the pressure, even if it gets rough. Alaba thought both the coach and Campbell would chew him out for being reckless. Instead, they were encouraging him, which warmed him from the inside out and instantly recharged him. Any self-doubt he'd felt vanished. He immediately turned to Tong Yi, nodding firmly, showing he understood, then he looked at Campbell. Got it. Thanks. Campbell grinned. Don't mention it, kid. Keep grinding. Let's bury those bums on the other side. Alaba nodded, solidifying his understanding. Tong Yi added, crash harder next time. Don't worry about mistakes. Trust your teammates to cover you. Just give me the opening and then hit them with everything you've got, over and over. Break their spirits, got it? Alaba nodded firmly, signaling understanding. Alaba sprinted back, just as Karlsruhe launched a side kick. Before Krebs could control the ball, Alaba, like a pit bull puppy, was all over him. Krebs panicked, fumbling the ball, which Alaba promptly poked away. Beautiful. Fantastic steal. David timed that perfectly, and he was decisive. I can feel the pressure even up here. Krebs got rattled, and for good reason. Opportunity. Counterattack. Klinsmann exclaimed, his voice bursting with excitement. Shoop was stunned. He leapt to his feet, eyes fixed on the field, a knot of worry tightening in his stomach. How is this possible? Why does Alaba suddenly seem like a completely different player? Defend. Get back. Defend. Shoop yelled at the top of his lungs. The Karlsruhe fans were on edge. Danger. The ball Alaba poked away landed perfectly at Griezmann's feet. As if with eyes in the back of his head, Griezmann seemed to sense Demirtas charging. He flicked the ball to his right rear with the outside of his foot, simultaneously pivoting to his left, dodging the onrushing Demirtas. Beautiful. An exquisite pass. Griezmann just schooled him. Karlsruhe's in trouble. Klinsmann screamed. The Allianz Arena exploded, the roar shaking the stadium as the fans in front of the TV were sent into fits. The Munich 1860 fans went wild. Their cheers grew louder and louder, accompanied by the increasingly frenzied beat of drums. They were cheering on their team. They were anticipating a goal, a counterattack. Munich 1860 was on the counterattack. Despite only having seen a few games of this new Munich 1860, they all knew this team's counterattacks were lethal. Opportunities like this almost always ended in goals. They were ecstatic, jumping to their feet. Shoop could no longer contain himself. The image of the calm, collected coach vanished, replaced by a frantic figure jumping up and down. He was screaming at the players on the field. Defend. Stay strong. Come on. Don't let him through so easily. Shoop wished he could be out there playing himself, hearing their coach. Karlsruhe's defenders swarmed Griezmann. But Griezmann wasn't trying to be a hero. Spotting an opponent closing in, he suddenly cut a pass to the center. No one expected De Bruyne to be there. Rushing into the open space in the middle, he abandoned his right-wing position, charging into the heart of the field. Risky, but Schupp and Klinsmann weren't surprised. They knew this was Tong Yi's system. De Bruyne was a whirlwind in that position, a free-roaming attacking midfielder who could pop up anywhere in the front. The wing wasn't his primary territory, it was the center. Griezmann played a similar role, hugging the center as much as possible. But while De Bruyne focused on orchestrating attacks from the middle, Griezmann looked to get closer to the goal. The two played similar roles, but with different functions. As soon as De Bruyne received the ball, Karlsruhe's defense started to unravel, leaving the right wing wide open. Kyle Walker, Munich 1860's fullback, sprinted forward on the wing, targeting the weakest part of Karlsruhe's defense. Danger. Immense danger. Karlsruhe's defensive players scrambled to the left, trying to cut off Walker, but they couldn't catch up. Walker was too fast. More importantly, De Bruyne had the ball. Danger. The Karlsruhe players were stretched thin on the left side of the defense, but at that moment, De Bruyne faked a move and sliced a diagonal pass to the left. The ball flew towards Alaba, who was also sprinting forward. It was a perfect pass, giving Alaba a clear path. By the time Alaba caught up to the ball, he was at the edge of Karlsruhe's penalty area. Even better, he was virtually unmarked. The Karlsruhe defenders were in disarray, scrambling to adjust and close in on Alaba. But they were too slow. Wow! What a switch! De Bruyne faked them out. Karlsruhe totally bought it. This is trouble. Big trouble. Klinsmann shouted, barely able to contain his excitement. Fred was stunned. This was bad. Frankly, he couldn't keep up. 1 minute, Karlsruhe was attacking and creating opportunities. The next, the momentum had completely shifted. Could Karlsruhe be that weak? Could they be unable to contain even a Bundesliga 2 bottom dweller like Munich 1860? Fred's face was a mask of bewilderment. The Karlsruhe fans were equally lost. How could the flow of the game change so drastically in an instant? What changed? Their attack barely troubled Munich 1860, yet their own goal was suddenly under siege. Was the gap between the teams really that wide? Karlsruhe's players were starting to panic, their defensive structure crumbling. The shift from offense to defense had been too abrupt. They were outnumbered, outmaneuvered by De Bruyne. They started to second-guess themselves, and that made their panic worse. Schupp was just as bad. He was panicking. He realized something was wrong. This was very dangerous. Alaba, having reached the ball, didn't cross it immediately. Instead, he dribbled quickly inside, straight into the Karlsruhe penalty area. The Karlsruhe fans tensed up, their hearts pounding. Karlsruhe's center-back, Sebastian Langkamp, a member of the German U21 national team, moved to intercept him. He tried to look confident, but he was rattled. After all, he had won the World Youth Championship with the U21s. Even though he wasn't a starter, he still felt the glow of the championship. He had confidence facing younger players. He sized up Alaba, waiting for the perfect moment to steal the ball or force him into a mistake. In his mind, Alaba was just a kid. He could handle him, but just as Langkamp was about to make his move, Alaba suddenly passed the ball backwards in a triangle, sending it to the top of the penalty area. There, an ocean of space. Karlsruhe didn't have many players back to defend, and they were now stuck in the penalty box, marking Costa and Lauter. The defensive midfielders were close to De Bruyne. The front of the penalty area was vacant. Griezmann, cutting inside, saw the ball and launched a shot with his left leg. The ball curled beautifully, sailing past the players in the box and over the outstretched arms of keeper Marcus Miller. It sailed into the upper right corner of the net. 1-0. Munich 1860 was ahead. Griezmann with the goal. The Allianz Arena exploded. The fans danced and chanted Griezmann's name in unison. This young French boy had brought so much joy to the team. They loved him very much. Griezmann immediately spun around and sprinted to Alaba on the wing, embracing him tightly. 083, give some hope, then despair. You are listening at NovelsThe Giant Creator. What a goal! Munich 1860's counterattack was lightning fast. Karlsruhe barely had time to react. Amazing! Just amazing! Klinsmann exclaimed, genuinely impressed. Even when his own team faces that kind of speed, there's not much he can do. Klinsmann's appreciation for Tong Yi grew even more. Wow, that counterattack was seriously quick, Fred added. Klinsmann chimed in, did you see that? David started the whole thing, right? And he assisted on the goal, didn't he? Ha. David's definitely Munich 1860's game changer. Fred's smile faltered, replaced by a wry look. At the start of the game, he predicted young Alaba would be Munich 1860's weak link, getting steamrolled by Karlsruhe. Now, Alaba was a weak link, alright, but he was helping Munich break through Karlsruhe, not the other way around. It was a seriously awkward moment for him. Of course, he wasn't the only one squirming. Schupp on the sidelines was too. Schupp's face was like thunder. Before the game, he'd hammered the point home. Alaba is just a kid with no Bundesliga experience. He's too green to handle the pressure. He'd told his players to hammer Alaba relentlessly, figuring they could easily crack him and score. His players had followed the plan perfectly, attacking Alaba with everything they had. But now, Alaba hadn't cracked, their defense had. Seeing the dazed looks on his players' faces, Schupp was mortified and furious. Damn Tong Yi, damn pretty boy, you just wait. He thought. This game is mine. Taking a gamble, Schupp frantically signaled his team to push forward, attack like crazy, and try to score quickly under intense pressure, and they were still focusing on Alaba. In their minds, Alaba's earlier performance was a fluke. They refused to believe a kid like that was ready for the big time. So, they kept pounding on him. Klinsmann worried about Alaba, taking that kind of beating at such a young age. How would it affect him mentally? He hoped Tong Yi would sub him out. Then again, if Alaba could tough it out, it would be an invaluable learning experience, helping him mature faster. Torn, Klinsmann was conflicted. 084, don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. You are listening at NovelsThe. Click. Tong Yi crunched into a green date, crisp, juicy, and sweet. Another win, 3-zip. His leadership had propelled Munich 1860 to 3 straight victories since the Bundesliga 2 season kicked off. The fans were going wild, a swirling mass of singing, dancing, and pure, unadulterated youthful energy, but they gave Stecrus all the credit. In their minds, they might as well have lost without him. Even now, some were chanting, we need Stecrus. Tong Yi ignored them, his eyes locked on Shu Pu across the way. Shu Pu's face was a mess, flushed and twisted. He clearly hadn't processed the loss. Seeing Tong Yi approach only made things worse. How could I lose to this pushover? No way. I refuse to lose to him. He glared at Tong Yi and spat, don't get cocky. This was a fluke. I'll crush you next time, you hear? Tong Yi didn't even acknowledge him, just walked on by. Click. He took another bite of the green date, savoring it. Man, this is good. Shu Pu's face turned purple. Veins throbbed in his forehead, and his teeth ground together. He was shaking with rage. Oblivious, Tong Yi headed straight for the post-game press conference, where reporters were already waiting. Shu Pu stormed in soon after and took a seat, and with that, the post-game press conference began. Tong Yi adjusted the microphone. But before he could speak, a voice cut through the air, we got beat, plain and simple. I underestimated Munich 1860, and I really underestimated Stecrus. He's a hell of a head coach. I just hope some 2-bit hustler doesn't steal him away. Shu Pu admitted defeat, admitted he'd been outcoached. But he made sure to direct the praise toward Stecrus, not Tong Yi. Honestly, Schupp couldn't care less who was really running Munich 1860. He just wanted to needle Tong Yi and make his life miserable. Tong Yi's smug face rubbed him the wrong way, and he was determined to wipe that smile off his face. The reporters lapped it up, ecstatic. This was the headline they'd been praying for. They looked at Shu Pu with hungry eyes. C. Even their opponent knows Stecrus is the brains behind the operation. So what do you have to say for yourself, Tong Yi? You're a fraud, star. They wanted details. Tong Yi raised an eyebrow. realizing he'd walked into a trap, he kept his mouth shut and watched Xu Pu's little show. Seizing the moment, Xu Pu grinned and elaborated, "You heard me right. Stecrus is the real head coach of Munich 1860. He calls the shots every game." The reporters were practically drooling. Xu Pu continued, "From the opening whistle, this guy, this Chinese guy, stands at the front. But if you watch closely, before every turning point in the game, he's huddled with Stecrus. He makes it look like a discussion, but really, Stecrus is calling the plays." The reporters pondered this, and a light bulb went off. Now that Xu Pu mentioned it, they realized it was true, not just today, but in the first 2 games as well. Before every key moment, Tong Yi seemed to need Stecrus's input. They'd missed the cues before. But Xu Pu had just handed them the smoking gun. Their eyes lit up with excitement. Finally, "We've got proof, star." Suddenly, many eyes turned to Tong Yi, filled with scorn and ridicule, but Tong Yi didn't react. He was unfazed. Xu Pu shot him a cold glance and pressed on, "I don't know Stecrus personally, but a friend of mine is close to him. And this friend told me Stecrus's tactics are strikingly similar to what Munich 1860 is doing right now. Not identical, but it's like Stecrus took those ideas and perfected them. So, congratulations to Mr. Stecrus." The reporters buzzed. More fuel for the fire. Xu Pu wasn't done yet. "But I feel bad for Stecrus. It's his work, but this Chinese guy is getting all the credit. Did this Chinese guy's girlfriend set this up? If that's the case, I really don't deserve German football." Xu Pu was being downright offensive. Tong Yi was sitting right there, and he just called him the Chinese guy, as if he didn't have a name. As if mentioning it would taint him. The reporters didn't seem to notice, or maybe they just didn't care. Xu Pu wrapped it up. "Stecrus's tactics are great. They won today. But let me tell you, Karlsruhe will not lose again next time. I've figured them out, and will be ready." He leaned back, smirking at Tong Yi. He wanted to see Tong Yi lose his cool, show some anger. But he was disappointed. Tong Yi was as calm as ever, like none of this mattered. Xu Pu frowned. Was this guy playing dumb? Or was he just too clueless to understand? Maybe he was just plain scared. The reporters swiveled to Tong Yi, peppering him with questions. Tong Yi said dismissively, "Honestly, this game was easier than I expected. I thought Karlsruhe was a Bundesliga-caliber team that got relegated, but they're a real letdown. No wonder they went down. The level of play is just poor." Xu Pu seethed. Tong Yi was showing no mercy. The reporters perked up. This was the kind of back and forth they craved. They were practically chanting, "Fight. Fight, star." Tong Yi continued, "To be frank, I'm disappointed. I wanted to gauge the level of Bundesliga teams, but Karlsruhe didn't even offer a challenge. Let me be clear, Munich 1860 isn't even running my full playbook yet. The players are still learning and finding their rhythm. They haven't unlocked the full potential of these tactics. I was hoping to use this game to fire them up, but, oh well." The reporter's eyes widened. Was Tong Yi bluffing? Xu Pu was equally stunned. No way. He's just changing the subject, trying to deflect attention. He wants to distract everyone from who's really in charge and ease the pressure. This Tong Yi is a smooth operator. Tong Yi plowed on, but this game also showed me that Munich 1860 can easily reach the top of the Bundesliga with our current roster. We don't even have to show our full hand. If you reveal your cards, you can do anything. Seriously, this disappoints me. It seems that this can only be solved when we go to the Bundesliga next season." Xu Pu and the reporters scoffed. Tong Yi was getting cocky. He was already talking about Munich 1860's promotion like it was a done deal. He clearly didn't respect anyone in the Bundesliga. Finally, a reporter couldn't take it anymore. Jacob stood and asked, "Mr. Tong Yi, what's your response to Mr. Xu Pu's comments? Are you using Mr. Stecrus? And if so, for how long? Ouch. That's a tough one, star." Tong Yi scowled at Jacob, his eyes full of mockery. Finally, the little weasel comes out of his hole. that he stared at Jacob for a beat and then said, "Let me ask you something, do you have a brain in your head? Are you really going to believe some random person spouting nonsense? I don't know how you became a reporter. Is the bar set that low these days? Hey, I could say you're not your father's son. Would you believe that?" Jacob's face went crimson. His eyes blazed with anger, but he kept his cool, barely. He forced himself to speak calmly. "Mr. Tong Yi, please remember your position. Don't slander people or resort to personal attacks. You'll only make us look down on you even more." Tong Yi chuckled. "Can't take the heat, huh? When you were slinging mud, did you ever think about other people's feelings? Do you have proof? Or were you just slinging insults and making wild guesses? Treat others as you want to be treated." He smirked, sweeping his gaze over the entire room. The reporters caught his drift. He was calling them all out. Their faces soured, ignoring their glares. Tong Yi continued, "From now on, do your homework before you report a story. Get your facts straight. The hallmark of journalism is accuracy. Remember that. Be reporters with a sense of social responsibility, not hatchet men who make things up and jump to conclusions. Think about why you wanted to be a reporter in the first place, remember what you learned in school, and don't make me, a layman, have to lecture you on the basics." He stood up and walked out. The reporters were livid, their faces flushed with fury. 085, is it imperative to replace Tong Yi? You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Munich 1860 claims top spot with 3-goal victory. Munich Aftenposten. 3 wins in a row propel Munich 1860 to the top. Berlin Morning Post. Tong Yi leads Munich 1860 to the Bundesliga 2 summit in just 6 weeks. Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Stecrus, the real mastermind behind Munich 1860. Munich Daily News. David Alaba named Black Lions Star of the Week. Daily Mail. Who's really driving Munich 1860's success in the Bundesliga? Rheinische Post. I'd jump at the chance to coach Stecrus one-on-one. Leipzig Volkszeitung. Munich 1860 fans demand coaching change despite 3 straight wins and Bundesliga 2 lead. Hamburg Morning Post. The day after the match, major media outlets were buzzing about Munich 1860's victory over Karlsruhe. Every reporter expressed disbelief that Munich 1860 had actually defeated Karlsruhe, a team recently relegated from the Bundesliga, calling it an upset. It was a surprise to almost everyone. Before the game, Karlsruhe was the clear favorite. After all, they had just come down from the Bundesliga and their roster was packed with players used to that level of competition. Most considered them far stronger. But Karlsruhe lost, and to Munich 1860, the team everyone pegged as likely to be relegated, major upset. The media described the results of the match in disbelief. They credited Munich 1860's exceptional performance and Karlsruhe's off night. But it had happened multiple times. Karlsruhe had opportunities and control, but luck wasn't on their side. The real focus quickly shifted to who was truly running the show at Munich 1860. Many believed that Tong Yi couldn't possibly be calling the shots. He was Chinese, appointed by a woman, and only had a few years of experience. How could someone like that take a team destined for relegation to the top of the Bundesliga too? They echoed Karlsruhe coach Schoop's sentiment. The real coach was Stecrus, Tong Yi's assistant. Munich 1860's success was all Stecrus, and Tong Yi had nothing to do with it. Schoop even claimed a friend close to Stecrus confirmed that Stecrus's previous tactical systems closely resembled Munich's 1860 current strategy. This had to be Stecrus's doing, not Tong Yi's. Schoop pointed out that Stecrus had over a decade of experience, including 10 years with Frank, and was a former professional player. Only someone with that background could devise such tactics, not someone like Tong Yi with a few years under his belt. Tong Yi was simply taking credit for Stecrus's work. The media ran wild with this narrative, overshadowing the news of Munich 1860's climb to the top. Everyone in Germany was debating how Tong Yi had managed to sideline Stecrus, assuming his girlfriend was involved. Fans of other teams piled on, criticizing Tong Yi relentlessly. Munich 1860 fans joined in and began calling for Tong Yi's replacement with Stecrus, to recognize the true hero and give a deserving coach a chance. Fans even gathered in front of the club headquarters to protest, holding signs demanding Stecrus be appointed head coach. Adding fuel to the fire, reports surfaced that other teams were interested in hiring Stecrus. Jacob reported that Rostock was looking for a new head coach after a string of losses had eroded management's confidence in Chatshuber. Jacob claimed Chatshuber's fate was sealed and Rostock was searching nationwide for a replacement. Two individuals connected to Munich 1860 were at the top of Rostock's list, both having a complicated relationship with Tong Yi. One was Leining, the German coach who had been passed over for the head coaching job in favor of Tong Yi. The other was Stecrus, whose media hype had captured Rostock's attention after their match against Munich 1860. Seeing Munich 1860, once a relegation candidate, now leading the Bundesliga 2, Rostock's management was naturally intrigued by Stecrus. Jacob also claimed Rostock had already contacted Stecrus to discuss the position. Munich 1860 fans panicked at the prospect of losing Stecrus. They couldn't imagine the team succeeding without him. The fans decided to take action, hoping to force the club's hand and recognize Stecrus. Only Stecrus could lead them to promotion. Stuck where they were, promotion might be the only path to salvation. Munich 1860 fans gathered in front of the club headquarters, chanting, "We want Marvin. Marvin for head coach." The movement gained momentum as fans marched through the streets of Munich, urging others to join their cause. They also targeted Munich 1860's official website, scrubbing it clean of any pro-Tong Yi content. Their goal was clear: get rid of Tong Yi and bring in Stecrus. The media flocked to Munich to cover the unrest. Reports of fans burning jerseys, scarves, and Tong Yi posters surfaced. Concerns escalated over stampedes and criminal activity. The incidents prompted the Munich government and police to pressure Munich 1860's management to quell the public anger and restore order. The media piled on, blaming Tong Yi and suggesting he should resign and hand the reins over to Stecrus. The German Professional Players Union also condemned Tong Yi, calling him a tyrant who disrespected players, disregarded their well-being, and was a disgrace to professional football. They demanded a lifetime ban and expulsion from Germany. Little Hoffmann joined the chorus, sharing his own experiences and accusing Tong Yi of incompetence and disrespect, claiming Munich 1860 would never find peace while Tong Yi remained. Hoffmann's accusations resonated with many, gaining him sympathy and support. As a result, more fans turned against Tong Yi, urging the club to replace him with Stecrus. The pressure on Baker was immense, making him question his decision. Staffs added to the pressure, asking, "Mr. Chairman, the backlash is too intense. Should we listen to public opinion and remove David?" Baker glared at Staffs, surprised by his support for the coaching change. Staffs continued, "The Munich government and the Professional Footballers Union have repeatedly raised concerns. The consequences could be severe if we don't address this." Baker took a deep breath and said, "Don't worry about them for now. Munich 1860 is finally gaining momentum. We can't afford to mess things up. What matters most is promotion." Baker knew that if the team didn't get promoted, the consequences would be dire. The club might not survive, and his own job as chairman would be in jeopardy. The team's current success offered a glimmer of hope for promotion. If Munich 1860 reached the Bundesliga, his position as chairman would be secure. Therefore, he wouldn't risk replacing Tong Yi. 086, Stecrus is really leaving. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Things were calm inside the Munich 1860 team. Despite the hype surrounding them, the atmosphere within the team is much more harmonious and unified than people realize. They're training hard and taking the upcoming games seriously. The team's playing great right now. After 3 games, Munich 1860 has a perfect record with 9 points. Thanks to a strong goal difference, they're currently in first place in Bundesliga 2. Only 2 teams in the league have won all their games, Munich 1860 and Union Berlin. Union Berlin, a newly promoted team, has been a surprise. They've won all 3 matches, scored 5 goals, and haven't conceded any. They're playing great on both ends of the field. Munich 1860 has scored 11 goals and allowed 4. putting them in first place by a narrow margin. The mood inside the club is high, and everyone sees a real chance for promotion. They're training hard, eager to make it to the Bundesliga. The players are actively training, with Kruger leading defensive drills. They're putting in the work. Looking at the league table, Tong Yi was surprised by Union Berlin's performance. The newly promoted team's first 3 games have been impressive. Without Munich 1860's strong start, they'd probably be on top, but it's still early in the season, and Union Berlin's high ranking could be a fluke. Their chances of promotion depend on how they perform going forward. If they can't maintain their momentum, they could easily fall back down and find themselves fighting relegation. The same goes for Munich 1860. Tong Yi knows not to underestimate the league. It's just starting, and many teams haven't found their footing yet. The standings will stabilize after about 10 games. Then the top teams will be the real contenders for promotion. Tong Yi is making sure to keep the players focused. The league is a marathon, not a sprint. They can't afford to let up now, or they'll be overtaken. The players nodded, understanding his point, and got back to training. Tong Yi was pleased. He's brought in a lot of young players, and they're highly motivated. They have that new kid on the block energy, which is great at the start, but if the team hits a rough patch and their performance dips, it could be hard for them to bounce back. That's a common issue with young players. He remembers Klopp facing similar problems early in his career. When young players are doing well, they can achieve anything. But when things go wrong, it's hard to get them back on track. That's why Tong Yi is pushing the Munich 1860 players so hard. He watched them training with satisfaction, hoping they could keep it up. While he trusts the players, there are other things he's worried about. He saw Stecrus approaching, newspaper in hand, and handed it to him. Stecrus looked confused, unsure what Tong Yi wanted. He took the paper and looked at it, and his expression changed. The newspaper had a report from Jacob claiming that Rostock was interested in hiring Stecrus. Stecrus looked uneasy. Tong Yi saw it and nodded, understanding. He asked, "Marvin, is Rostock actually talking to you?" Stecrus' discomfort increased. Tong Yi knew everything he needed to know. Jacob's report wasn't just a rumor. He nodded and said, "Okay. What are you planning to do?" Tong Yi knew that Stecrus would eventually want to manage his own team. He supports that ambition, and he knows Stecrus has been working hard to prepare. So, he wasn't surprised, but he didn't expect it to happen now. The timing is tricky. If Stecrus leaves Munich 1860 now, what will the fans think? They might assume Tong Yi couldn't tolerate Stecrus and forced him out to maintain control. The media might suggest that Stecrus was rebelling because he felt Tong Yi was taking all the credit. Stecrus's departure could be seen as an attempt to prove himself. Of course, Stecrus probably wasn't thinking that way. He knew that now wasn't the best time to leave. He knew it would cause problems for Tong Yi. But the opportunity was too good to pass up. Several teams are interested in him, and some have already made offers. He didn't want to miss his chance. He worried he wouldn't get another shot. He used to be a nobody in the world of professional soccer. Without Tong Yi, he'd still be unknown. If he turned this down, would he disappear again? There wouldn't be as many clubs interested in him later. He was torn. Rostock's people have been in contact, negotiating with him. He hadn't told Tong Yi because he felt bad about it. Leaving now would cause Tong Yi a lot of trouble, but he didn't want to pass up such a great opportunity. He's been struggling with the decision. He knew he had to tell Tong Yi soon. Negotiations were coming to a close, and he'd have to let Tong Yi know eventually. He had been dreading the conversation. Now that Tong Yi brought it up, he was relieved but felt even guiltier. It was hard for him to say, but he apologized. "I'm sorry, David. I might have to let you down. This opportunity is too important to me. I can't turn it down. Tong Yi saw the conflict on Stecrus's face and understood. When he first arrived, almost every team in Germany rejected him. He knew how important an opportunity could be. He understood what this meant to Stecrus. He didn't blame Stecrus, and he was even grateful. When he first came to Munich 1860, things were chaotic. Without Stecrus's help, he wouldn't have stabilized the team so quickly or achieved such positive results. Stecrus is essential to Munich 1860's current success. 087, his injury is completely healed. You are listening at NovelsThe Giant Creator. Wagner walked right over to Tong Yi, plopped down, grabbed a handful of the green dates next to him, and started munching. Crunchy and juicy, he thought, clearly satisfied. After downing a couple, Wagner swiveled to Tong Yi and asked, "So, what's up? Someone get hurt?" Tong Yi shook his head slightly. "Can't a guy just want to hang out?" Wagner retorted, "I'm the team doctor. If nobody's injured, what do you need me for?" Tong Yi grinned. "Can't I just want to catch up?" Wagner rolled his eyes. "You make it sound like we're just casual acquaintances." Tong Yi chuckled, "Hey, it's called being human." Wagner shot back, "Still the same old you." Tong Yi held up his hands. Okay, enough joking around. Let's talk business." Wagner gave him another eye roll. "Networking isn't serious business. You're telling me that's not superficial?" Tong Yi offered Wagner 2 green dates. "Here, have a couple." "Is this being superficial?" Wagner rolled his eyes again, but still took the offered fruit. "Hey, it wasn't a matter of principle, those green dates were just too damn good." He took a bite, a look of contentment spreading across his face, and finally said, "All right, let's get down to it." Tong Yi asked, "How's Philip doing? Is he fully recovered?" Wagner knew that this was the real reason for the summons, the only thing that truly required his expertise. Rolling his eyes, he said, "That's it. You dragged me away from my research for this? You could have bothered Daphne or someone else." Tong Yi countered quickly, "Doesn't this make you feel important?" Wagner rolled his eyes so hard he thought they might get stuck. He was starting to worry his eyes were going bad with all the eye rolling. He decided to drop it. "Philip's completely recovered. So, relax." Tong Yi was visibly relieved. Senderos was finally healthy. Now, Munich 1860's defense would instantly be a whole lot stronger. This could push Munich 1860 to an even higher level. Tong Yi was genuinely excited. Wagner was just that good. No other medical team could have gotten Senderos back in shape so quickly. Tong Yi remembered Senderos' old injury never really healing. It had contributed to a rapid decline in skill that had affected his entire career. Now that it was fixed, Senderos wouldn't decline and retire anytime soon. "Thanks, Leo," Tong Yi said. "You've been a huge help." Wagner grabbed 2 more dates and said matter-of-factly, "Spare me the mushy stuff. How about you just get me a couple more boxes of those green dates? Consider it done." Tong Yi said. Wagner grinned. "Thanks, then." Tong Yi waved his hand dismissively and immediately signaled for Campbell to come over. Campbell jogged over, a little breathless. "Boss, what's up?" Tong Yi was pleased with Campbell's dedication. This was how you did it. Even at his age, Campbell was busting his butt in training, leading by example. No wonder he had supported him for the new captain position. Seeing Campbell's work ethic, the other Munich 1860 players were also pushing themselves harder. It was a major reason for the team's recent success. Tong Yi clapped Campbell on the shoulder and motioned for him to sit. Then, he asked, "You've been training with Philip lately. What do you think?" Campbell frowned slightly. "He's not quite there yet. He still seems hesitant in head-on challenges. It's like that old foot injury hasn't fully healed. But when he does get past it, I'm very optimistic about him." Tong Yi and Wagner exchanged a worried look. Seeing their expressions, Campbell looked confused. "What's wrong?" Wagner remained silent. Tong Yi explained, "Leo just told me that Philip's physical exam report came back yesterday, and he's fully recovered." Campbell looked shocked. "That's impossible. I can clearly feel something's off with his right leg during defense. He himself is being very cautious." Wagner interjected, "His injuries have healed. What you're seeing is psychological. He's still dealing with the mental trauma." "Understand." Hearing this, Tong Yi and Campbell lowered their heads, thinking it over before nodding in understanding. However, they were still worried. Tong Yi looked at Wagner anxiously and asked, "What can we do? Is there anything that can be done to help him get over that psychological trauma?" Campbell looked equally concerned. Wagner shook his head slightly. "That's something he has to do himself. Only he can conquer the demons in his mind and truly heal. Tong Yi and Campbell nodded, but they were still apprehensive. This situation was too unpredictable. Could Senderos conquer his inner demons? That was the question. Tong Yi looked at Campbell and said, in training, you need to reassure him that he's physically fine. The problems now are all in his head. He has to defeat his own fears. You got that? Campbell nodded. Understood. Tong Yi nodded in return, then turned to Wagner. There shouldn't be any physical risk in playing Senderos now, right? Physically, he's fine, Wagner confirmed. Good, Tong Yi said. He paused, then added, maybe actual game experience will help him overcome his mental block faster. Campbell didn't offer an opinion, simply looking at Tong Yi. Tong Yi immediately waved for Kruger to bring Senderos over. Senderos looked at Tong Yi with a puzzled expression. He didn't know why he'd been summoned. Tong Yi handed Senderos the physical exam report. Philip, congratulations. The medical center has confirmed that your injury has fully healed. Senderos was stunned, then quickly scanned the report. His excitement grew as he reached the end. The injury that had plagued him for so long was finally gone. He was so excited that his body shook. Tong Yi, seeing Senderos' excitement, poured a little cold water on it. Your body has healed, but the mental trauma remains. I'm sure you felt it during training. Senderos stopped short, his face falling. He knew Tong Yi was right. During training, when facing a challenge, he instinctively felt that his injury hadn't healed, causing him to hold back during defense. Previously, he had assumed it was due to lingering physical issues, but now he knew his injury was gone. This was a mental issue. Senderos looked lost. Was his mental game that weak? Was it his fragile heart that was holding him back, not his injuries? Tong Yi saw his distress and clapped him on the shoulder. Don't overthink it. Take your time. Now that we know the problem, we can work on it. Believe in yourself. Think back to when you first started. It was much harder then, and you got through it. What's this compared to that? Senderos nodded slowly, agreeing. He was also deeply grateful to Tong Yi, who clearly believed in him. What a blessing. I will give it my best effort, boss. Senderos promised. Tong Yi added, when you're training, remind yourself that you're physically fine. Be aggressive when challenging attacking players. Soul will always be there to cover you. Remember, you're not fighting alone. Senderos nodded enthusiastically, his heart overflowing with gratitude for those around him. He bowed to the three men. Tong Yi and the others immediately told him to stand up straight, telling him, be ready to play. I'm going to put you in a game soon to get your feet wet. Maybe the excitement of a real match will distract you from your concerns, and you can get back to the top. Senderos was beyond grateful. Under the circumstances, Tong Yi was willing to give him a chance to play and help him rediscover his old self. That was something only the best managers would do. He secretly vowed never to let Tong Yi down. Boss, don't worry. I'm ready, Senderos said. Tong Yi nodded, telling Senderos not to put so much pressure on himself and to just take it one step at a time. Then, he sent Campbell and Senderos back to training, turning his attention to the upcoming weekend league game. Right now, Tong Yi was focused on those league results. It was almost the end of August, and within a month, it would be March. Therefore, the team's current performance was extremely important. He had to ensure that the team was ranked first in the league at the end of September so that Taikai could continue as the coach of 1860 Munich. But right now, the team's performance was pretty good, currently ranked first. As long as he kept it up and won all the way, he would be able to achieve his goal. Naturally, at this time, he must go all out and take it seriously. This weekend, Munich 1860 was heading to Allen for an away game. Allen's performance in Bundesliga 2 last season hadn't been very good, ranking in the middle and lower leagues, and his strength was not very strong. But after all, Tong Yi still attaches great importance to away games. He doesn't want any accidents to occur. However, Tong Yi is naturally full of confidence in this game, because Allen's results this season are very impressive. He and his team Munich 1860 were judged by the so-called media reporters as the favorites to be relegated. So far, the 3 rounds of the league have ended. The Allen team has lost 3 games, scored 1 goal and conceded 5 goals. It ranks at the bottom of the league and is the deputy squad leader of the league. Facing such a team, Munich 1860 should have no problem. Even those media reporters who are very eager for Munich 1860 to lose think that it is difficult for Munich 1860 to lose in this game, and winning should be very easy. 088, sure enough, what is supposed to come has come. You are listening at NovelsThe. Sure enough, Munich 1860 beat Allen 4-1 in their away game, just as the media predicted. Lauter scored twice, while Matic and Griezmann each added a goal. Munich 1860's forwards have incredible scoring ability, making them the envy of many second-division German teams. Klinsmann was thrilled, feeling even more confident in Tong Yi's player selection. Tong Yi's recent signings have been phenomenal. It's astonishing, however, after the game, the media didn't praise anyone. Instead, they unleashed a barrage of criticism at Tong Yi and one particular player, Senderos. Tong Yi had kept his promise, giving Senderos a chance to play in the second half. He gave Senderos 10 minutes to readjust to the game's pace and atmosphere, but Senderos looked rusty out there. Several key defensive plays were shaky, causing Munich 1860 to lose control in the second half and creating tense moments near their goal. In the 89th minute, Senderos made a defensive blunder and Allen's forward, Lars Toberg, broke through, going one-on-one against De Gea. Even De Gea couldn't stop Toberg's low shot, resulting in a goal for Allen. If Tong Yi hadn't given Senderos that playing time, Munich 1860 might not have conceded the goal or even lost their lead. After the game, the media grilled Tong Yi about his decision. Why bring on Senderos? He's not the Premier League's rising star defender anymore. He's washed up. Why force him into the game? Is he your golden boy? Wait a minute, that can't be right. Senderos is about the same age as Tong Yi, only 24 days younger. How could he be his golden boy? Could Senderos be Tong Yi's long-lost brother? Is that why he keeps praising him? Regardless, the media had a field day after the game, finding every opportunity to criticize Tong Yi, using Senderos as their weapon. Senderos and Tong Yi felt the full force of the criticism and the immense pressure. Senderos felt guilty for causing trouble for Tong Yi, who had placed so much trust in him. He was furious with himself. Why couldn't he perform well and make Tong Yi proud, like Vardy, Costa, De Bruyne, and Griezmann? Senderos vowed that if he got another chance, he wouldn't let Tong Yi down again. Tong Yi approached Senderos to comfort him, telling him to ignore the media's gossip, focus on training, compete hard, relax, and take his time. Senderos was even more grateful. He knew he'd come to Munich 1860 at the right time. He promised himself he'd never let Tong Yi down. Matic and others were deeply moved by Tong Yi's support of Senderos. They were fortunate to have a coach like him. They clenched their fists, secretly pledging to play their best to help Tong Yi win the March agreement and stay with Munich 1860. They didn't want to disappoint him. Tong Yi called Campbell and entrusted Senderos to him. Campbell didn't say much. This was a good opportunity for him to hone his skills as the team's player coach. He saw Tong Yi's request as a test and took it very seriously. Of course, his main focus remained on training and playing. He was also aware of the March agreement and hoped Tong Yi would win the bet, stay at Munich 1860, and lead them to compete in Bundesliga 2 and beyond. He was fully committed. Munich 1860 was in a great position, with excellent results. After 4 games, they were the only team in the Bundesliga still undefeated, leading the league with 12 points. St. Pauli and Union Berlin were second and third with 10 points each. While Munich 1860's lead wasn't huge, they were still on top. As long as they avoided mistakes and maintained their form, Tong Yi could stay. They were preparing seriously for their next league game. The Munich 1860 team was united and determined to improve, fostering a positive team atmosphere. But then, something unexpected happened. Assistant coach Stecrus officially left Munich 1860 to become the head coach of Rostock. The official websites of both clubs announced the move. Rostock had lost patience and fired their coach, Chatshuber. After losing to Munich 1860, Rostock suffered 2 more defeats. They lost 1-0 to Berlin Union and 2-0 to Oberhausen. Combined with their previous 4-game losing streak, they were now near the bottom of the league. Rostock's management fired Chatshuber, making him the first coach to be sacked in the Bundesliga season. Rostock's chairman, Stuckermann, chose Stecrus over Leining. With so much media attention on Stecrus and rumors of other teams being interested, Rostock acted quickly to secure him. It was a classic blitz. The news only broke when Rostock's official website announced it. Many Bundesliga leaders regretted not realizing Stecrus's desire to leave sooner. Allen's team, struggling like Rostock, was especially regretful. They had been very interested in Stecrus and were planning to contact him. But before they could act, he had already joined Rostock. Heinz-Jürgen Gosta, Allen's chairman, told reporters, "It's a real shame. We admire Marvin and his style is exactly what we need. Our management had a meeting and were preparing to contact him, but he's already joined Rostock. What a pity." The regret was evident in his words. The media went wild reporting on Stecrus's move to Rostock, and it became a major topic in Germany. The media seemed to agree that Tong Yi was behind Stecrus's departure. They claimed Tong Yi was trying to undermine Stecrus and push him out, forcing him to leave. They said Tong Yi didn't have the power, so his girlfriend intervened. They claimed Tong Yi, a pretty boy, used his girlfriend to pave the way for his relative. Jacob even wrote, "See how a soft-hearted man operates. It doesn't matter how strong the public opinion is, or how many people support Stecrus. It won't work in Munich 1860. The coach can only be himself. If someone is disobedient, get out." So, Tong Yi drove away Stecrus. Munich 1860 fans were outraged. Their opposition intensified, and they gathered to protest in front of the club building. They held up a huge banner demanding Stecrus's return and calling for Tong Yi's removal. They claimed Munich 1860 didn't need a soft-boiled man. They burned club scarves, merchandise, and flags to show their dissatisfaction with the management's decision to let Stecrus go, and to pressure Tong Yi to leave. Some fans waived their season tickets and demanded refunds. Refund the tickets. If they don't get rid of the soft-boiled guy, we want refunds. We refuse to enter the Allianz Arena and let Tong Yi, that trash, get out of here. The protests put pressure on the Munich 1860 management, as well as the Munich police and traffic authorities, who were concerned about the volatile situation. The Munich government and police department pressured the club's management to calm the situation and restore order. The Munich 1860 fans were proving to be a force to be reckoned with. The Munich 1860 management felt the pressure. Representatives from the custody center approached Baker and expressed their dissatisfaction. They asked him why he was acting this way and whether he still wanted to be the chairman of Munich 1860. They said if he didn't, they would replace him. 089, it's hardest to accept the kindness of a beautiful woman. You are listening at NovelsThe. Was the board of directors planning to oust Baker, the chairman of Munich 1860? Stoffels, overhearing the conversation, got really excited. If Baker got the boot, he'd have a real shot at taking over. He was practically salivating at the thought. The first thing he'd do as chairman would be to get rid of Tong Yi, that pretty boy, but, hey, a guy can dream, right? Looks like the board wasn't totally sold on ditching Baker yet. Baker immediately jumped in, telling the board representative that Munich 1860 was doing great, and it was all thanks to Tong Yi, not Stecrus like the media was saying. That's why he was sticking by Tong Yi. Keeping Tong Yi around was Munich 1860's ticket to moving up. The representative still had faith in Baker but countered, even so, why let Stecrus go? Wouldn't keeping him give the team some extra insurance, and avoid all this drama? Baker chuckled. David and I both wanted Marvin to stay, but he was dead set on leaving. He said his dream was to coach a team on his own, and when this opportunity came up, he couldn't pass it up. So, he insisted on leaving, and we couldn't really stop him. The board representative was speechless. He just told Baker to make sure there weren't any more screw-ups, or he wouldn't be able to protect Baker. Baker, relieved, promised there wouldn't be any more problems. The representative left, satisfied for the moment, but the pressure on Baker only intensified. He signaled to Stoffels, "Get David over here. I need to talk to him. We can't have any more hiccups. The team needs to be stable." "Yeah, Keeping things steady was the top priority. Stoffels was bummed about missing his chance to axe Tong Yi. But he kept his disappointment under wraps. He was sure another opportunity would come along. Seeing Baker summon him, he reported, "Mr. Chairman, Tong Yi's out of the country. He's not in Germany." Baker was surprised. "Not in Germany? Where'd he go?" Stoffels answered quickly, "I heard from the transfer department that he went to Italy." What was he doing in Italy? Then it hit Baker. His niece, Martina, was in Italy. This guy Tong Yi was heading to Italy to see her. Even though Baker thought Tong Yi was slacking off, he figured Tong Yi and Martina had been apart for a couple of months and needed a reunion. So, he let it slide. Baker simply said, "All right, tell him to come see me when he gets back." Stoffels nodded, pretending to understand. Baker turned to Stoffels. He said, "All this news is blowing up. Try to minimize the damage. And talk to Bruns. Have him keep the players in line. We can't have any infighting." Baker was worried that Stecrus' departure would mess with the Munich 1860 players and cause chaos. Stoffels nodded in agreement, but he added, "It's an international break, the league's in the off-season. There aren't many players around, so there shouldn't be any major issues." Right, Bundesliga 2 was on a 10-day break, and it was international match day. Some Munich 1860 players were with their national teams or youth squads, playing in international competitions. Lots of players were gone. Tong Yi let them go but told them to try not to get injured. Those players were his prized possessions. He couldn't risk them getting hurt. Then, Tong Yi took off for Italy himself. Of course, it wasn't just for Martina. He was also going to see Vieri on business. Winkler had messaged him about some problems with Vieri, wanting Tong Yi to come to Italy ASAP to sort things out. He just hadn't had time before. Now it was the international break, a short break from the league. And the summer transfer window was closing fast. Tong Yi wanted to seal the deal with Vieri as soon as possible. Bruns had returned with bad news. Tristan had decided to retire in Spain, joining the Addis team and turning down Munich 1860. This wasn't the first time Tong Yi had been rejected. He'd been turned down by the Dutch Boer Davis in England. And Jordi Alba had rejected him in Spain. Sure, Tong Yi's trip to Spain had brought back De Gea, Costa, and Griezmann, which was a major win. But he'd also taken some hits. Both his buyout offer and his loan request for Jordi Alba were rejected. Alba himself had given Tong Yi a hard no. So, Tong Yi was used to being rejected and wasn't too bothered. Since Tristan was a lost cause, Tong Yi was determined to get Vieri no matter what. He flew straight to Italy. Honestly, Tong Yi thought signing Vieri would be a breeze. He remembered Vieri being in a tough spot, eager to keep playing but unable to find a team. Munich 1860 was throwing him a lifeline, so he should have jumped at the chance. Why was there a problem now? With these questions in mind, Tong Yi touched down in Italy. Stepping out of Milan Malpensa airport, Tong Yi spotted a gorgeous blonde waiting for him. She was tall, maybe around 5 feet 11 inches, but she definitely wasn't awkward. She was curvy in all the right places, her figure was killer, and her long legs, covered in black stockings, were seriously eye-catching. They were straight, slender, and could make a guy lose his mind. Men were shamelessly staring at her, some even tripping over themselves. She was wearing a cute miniskirt, which made her look even younger and hotter. Combined with her beauty, she was a total knockout. When she saw Tong Yi, her eyes lit up. She let out a squeal of delight and practically flew into his arms, wrapping them around his neck and her long legs around his waist, planting a kiss on him. It was Tong Yi's girlfriend, Martina. The same rich woman who was supposedly bankrolling Tong Yi. According to the German media, Winkler, standing nearby, couldn't help but feel jealous. Tong Yi was living the dream, having a sugar mama like that. He wished he could switch places. Tong Yi was still a little confused. He hadn't told Martina he was coming to Italy. He wanted to surprise her. How did she know? Had Winkler ratted him out? It was the only explanation. Winkler was the only one who knew he was coming. Since Martina knew now, Winkler must have spilled the beans. Tong Yi was annoyed. Winkler was probably jealous and sabotaged his surprise. He'd give Winkler a piece of his mind later. After some sweet moments with Martina, Tong Yi peeled himself away and headed towards Winkler. The hearts of countless men in the airport shattered into pieces, their eyes were bloodshot as they glared at Tong Yi, consumed by envy, jealousy, and resentment. What was so special about this Chinese guy? Why did he get to have such a perfect woman? It wasn't fair. Tong Yi ignored them, and Martina didn't even notice them. She only had eyes for Tong Yi. She clung to his arm like a little bird, never letting go. She snuggled up to him like he was her whole world. Tong Yi could feel Martina's love and was determined to cherish her. He walked up to Winkler and said coldly, "I can't believe you, with your innocent face, are actually a backstabbing traitor." Winkler retorted, "Don't accuse me of something I didn't do. I didn't betray you." To be honest, seeing Tong Yi with Martina, he was definitely feeling a twinge of jealousy. Tong Yi frowned. "If it wasn't you, how would Martina know I was coming to Italy? I wanted to surprise her." Before Winkler could answer, Martina piped up, "Yao Yao, don't be mad at Bernhard." Yao Yao was Martina's pet name for Tong Yi. Martina had learned that people from Sichuan called Yi Yao, so she'd given Tong Yi the nickname Yao Yao. Tong Yi had resisted at first, but it didn't work. So the name stuck. Tong Yi, a grown man, was a little embarrassed in front of Winkler. Tong Yi asked, "If it wasn't him, how did you know I was coming to Italy?" Martina smiled, "Of course I knew you were coming. I set it up." Tong Yi was even more confused. He looked at Winkler, waiting for an explanation. Winkler filled Tong Yi in. Winkler had gone to England but arrived too late. Vieri had already left and wasn't signing with Notts County. Since Vieri wasn't in England, Winkler had flown to Italy, but instead of finding Vieri right away, he'd met Martina. Then, he tracked down Vieri, mentioned that Munich 1860 wanted to sign him, and Vieri had immediately agreed. Winkler was planning to fly back to Germany with Vieri, but Martina, missing Tong Yi, asked Winkler to tell Tong Yi that there were some problems with the transfer, needing Tong Yi to come to Italy in person. So, Tong Yi had been summoned by Martina. Hearing the whole story, Tong Yi was overwhelmed with guilt and emotion. Since becoming the coach of Munich 1860, he'd been so busy that he'd neglected Martina. He felt terrible. He was touched by everything she'd done. It's hard to resist a beautiful woman's kindness. He decided to make it up to her. He gave Martina a big hug and told her that he was going to stay in Italy for a while to spend time with her. Martina was thrilled and rewarded him with a passionate kiss. 090, Tong Yi's Travels in Italy. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Before September 1st, Munich 1860 signed Italian striker Vieri. Vieri returned to Germany with Winkler that same day, but Tong Yi stayed behind. He stayed with Martina. Of course, Martina seemed to have traded her strong woman persona for a more affectionate one. She spent her days cuddling with Tong Yi, savoring every sweet moment. She even postponed her work in Italy to travel with him. Today, Tong Yi went with Martina to an amusement park. He looked at her, his eyes full of affection. "Why here?" he asked. It was Martina's idea to come to this particular place. Her eyes sparkled as she entered the park, as if she'd never been to one before. Everything fascinated her. She looked up at Tong Yi. "It's been so long since I've been to an amusement park," she said. "The only thing I remember is getting hurt here on my 8th birthday." Surprised, Tong Yi asked, "Why? Didn't your parents ever bring you to places like this when you were a kid?" Her eyes clouded over, and she shook her head, distressed. Tong Yi hugged her. "Tell me, what do you want to do today? I'm all yours." As he said this, he glanced nervously at the roaring roller coaster, then made the promise like he was steeling himself for something difficult. Martina saw his reaction. A smile played on her lips as she put her hands behind her back. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely," Tong Yi replied. Martina grinned, then pointed a delicate finger at the roller coaster. "I want to ride that." Tong Yi's face momentarily betrayed him. He'd figured she'd want to ride it eventually, but not so soon. He'd envisioned building up to it. Roller coasters were definitely a challenge for Tong Yi. Truthfully, he was even more of a novice than Martina. He'd grown up in a small, poor village in Sichuan. He'd seen amusement parks as a kid, but never experienced the rides, because he had never been able to afford them. Because he'd never been on one, he was terrified of them. especially things like roller coasters and drop towers, that fear still lingered. Martina smiled knowingly. What's wrong? Are you scared? Tong Yi blinked. Are you kidding? Why would I be scared? Let's do it. Martina couldn't help but laugh at his bravado. The way he gritted his teeth was adorable. Forget it, she said. Let's do something else. She'd only been teasing him and had no intention of forcing him. Besides, she cared about Tong Yi and didn't want him to be uncomfortable. Tong Yi sensed her concern immediately. No way, let's do it. Martina smiled. Still not scared? Of course I'm a little scared. But if you want to, I'm in. Martina was touched, but still hesitant. Let's not. I don't want you pushing yourself. It's the thought that counts. Tong Yi insisted, it's okay. I want to try it, too. I've never been on a roller coaster before. Martina looked at him. Really? Really? Martina was as happy as a kid on Christmas morning. You're the best. She grabbed his hand and dragged him toward the roller coaster. They were like teenagers, carefree and completely caught up in the moment. Tong Yi thought he'd mentally prepared himself, that he wouldn't be afraid, but as the ride began, the fear kicked in, fear of the unknown, and maybe a little fear of heights. Tong Yi sat stiffly in his seat, his body tense. Noticing his discomfort, Martina reached out and held his hand, her big eyes filled with admiration, easing his tension and fear. Don't worry, Yao Yao, she said gently. I'm here. I'll protect you. Tong Yi felt a little embarrassed. Was this something he should be saying? Suddenly, the roller coaster lurched into motion, and Tong Yi's newly relaxed body tensed up again. Filled with anxiety, he felt a pang of regret. What had he been thinking? He looked at Martina with a pleading expression. Is it too late to get off? Martina smiled sweetly. Definitely too late. But her grip on his hand was firm, giving him a sense of security. The roller coaster shot off, plunging and soaring through the air, rattling Tong Yi's insides and making him feel queasy. When it finally stopped, Tong Yi almost stumbled as he got out. How do people enjoy this? He wondered aloud. What's the appeal? Why do so many people love this? Martina, still flushed with excitement from the ride, saw his distress. She silently scolded herself for suggesting it. It's okay, Tong Yi reassured her. I'm just not used to it. Give me a minute to recover, and we can do something else. Martina said worriedly, maybe we should skip the rides. I don't want you to feel sick. Tong Yi insisted, I'm fine, just give me 2 or 3 minutes. He couldn't let the day end like this, not after finally getting here. Plus, he knew he'd be busy again soon and wouldn't have much time to spend with Martina. He wanted to make her happy. Martina understood. Although she was still concerned, she agreed. She was happy that Tong Yi was doing this for her. Without resting, Tong Yi dragged Martina to other attractions. After surviving the roller coaster, nothing else seemed as scary. Tong Yi relaxed and enjoyed himself, laughing and playing alongside Martina. They spent the entire day at the amusement park. By the time they left, they were exhausted, but both were happy. It had been years since they'd been so carefree and uninhibited, and it felt good. As they walked, Tong Yi and Martina attracted envious glances. He was handsome, she was beautiful. For the next few days, Tong Yi stayed with Martina. They went to the opera, attended Fashion Week, explored science and technology parks, and visited private art exhibitions. They packed a lot in. Back at the hotel, they both sighed. Having fun is more tiring than working. But they were happy, exhausted, but hoping the feeling could last forever. Reality soon intervened. Time flew, and Tong Yi had to leave. He was going back to Germany to prepare for the next league game, while Martina still had obligations in Italy. Before leaving, Tong Yi attended a fashion show hosted by Martina's company. He met many celebrities, witnessed Martina's connections, and even saw her designs. Martina was incredibly talented. Tong Yi felt like he must have saved the world in a past life to have such an amazing girlfriend. Tong Yi had stayed in Italy for nearly a week. He had to say goodbye to Martina and return to Germany. Martina didn't want him to leave, but she understood. They both had work to do. Still, she set aside her commitments to see him off at the airport. To be honest, she almost hadn't made it out of bed that morning. The night before had left her feeling completely drained. Before he boarded the plane, Martina gave Tong Yi a long, lingering hug. If it hadn't been for the boarding announcements, she wouldn't have let go. She gave him a sweet kiss. "Fly safe, and text me when you land." Tong Yi nodded. "Take care of yourself. Work's important, but don't forget to rest." After more pleasantries, they almost missed the flight. Finally, they separated, and Tong Yi boarded the plane to Germany. He had a great time in Italy. He was all in when he was playing. Now that he was back, he immediately refocused on his work. The upcoming month was critical for Tong Yi. If he couldn't keep Munich 1860 at the top of the league, he'd lose his job as head coach. He had to ensure that they stayed in first place at the end of September. He was confident. The addition of Vieri had only strengthened his resolve. Of course, Stecrus' departure had also made an impact. He needed to find a new offensive coach, but there was no rush. Right now, the focus was on the weekend league game. This weekend, 1860 Munich would face Fürth at their home stadium, the Allianz Arena. Fürth had performed well in Bundesliga 2 last season, finishing 5th with the same points as Aachen, who finished 4th. They were only 4 points behind third-placed Nuremberg, so promotion wasn't far away. Tong Yi had to take this team seriously, or Munich 1860 could be in trouble.